Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the December 15th, 2015 meeting of the Los Gatos Town Council. We're going to start with, first of all, asking everybody to turn off their devices, silence their devices, and ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Thank you and good evening. Councilmember Marcia Jensen.
Here.
Councilmember Rob Rennie.
Here.
Councilmember Steve Leonardis.
Here.
Vice Mayor Mariko Sayak.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Barbara Spector.
Here. Every meeting, we have some young person from our community help us lead the flag salute. And so today is no different. It's Brayton Arthur. Brayton Arthur. Brayton, would you please come on up? Let me tell you a little bit about Brayton. He's a very impressive young man. He lives in Los Gatos. He goes to St. Andrew's School in Saratoga. He's in the 5th grade. He has a lot of loves in his life. He loves basketball. He loves to play on the computer, especially Minecraft. He loves to read. He loves to read all kinds of books, including Harry Potter books. He loves to snow ski. And he has a dog and 2 cats, and I'm sure he loves his dog and 2 cats too. The dog's name is Coco, and the cat's names are Toes and Fluffy. And he has another love in his life, which is someone that we in the town really appreciate also, which is our Assistant Town Attorney, Lynn Lampros. So let's give a round of applause for Brayton. Now, as soon as I get this turned right on, give the mic over to Brayton, and if you'll all join us in the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Round of applause. So as he goes back down to join his attorney mom, another round of applause. Now, before you all, most of you got here this evening, the council was actually hard at work since 5 o'clock, even before, where we interviewed individuals applying for our various commissions and committees. I will tell you that in my history on the council, we have never had so many applicants. Not only did we have a lot of applicants, these people from Los Gatos who were applying were absolutely stellar. Any single one of them would be a huge benefit to any committee, commission, or business. They're just great. Los Gatos is very fortunate to have this group of people. And so not everybody is going to be selected. We had a lot of people. But I would say that you're also fantastic. If you don't get chosen this evening, please do reapply. Do be involved in our community. You're just so stellar. Now, having said that, I'm going to be turning the process over to our clerk, who will be going through the names of the people who applied, and the council will be making its vote and decision.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, I will be announcing the boards, commissions, and committees in alphabetical order, along with the number of vacancies, number of applicants who have applied to the positions, and how many votes each council member will have for that board, commission, or committee. I will then announce each applicant and ask for a vote by show of hands. Once council has completed the voting process for the commission, I will announce the applicant or applicants who have been selected to that position. This process will continue for each board, commission, and committee during the evening's appointment process. Upon completion of the appointment process, council should direct the clerk administrator to re-advertise for any open positions. The first board commissioner committee is the Ad hoc Citizen Committee. There is one vacancy, 7 applicants, and each council member may have 1 vote. First name is Mark Bonet. Second name is Uday Nagadran. Third name is Mark Sekia. Thomas Spilsbury. Stanford Stickney. Heidi Timmons Owens. Jack Van Neda. Jack Van Neda is appointed to the Ad hoc Citizen Committee. Arts and Culture Commission, there are 5 vacancies and 5 applicants. Each council member may have 5 votes. Rita Baum, Amy Fashnat, Matthew Miller, Thomas Spilsbury, Colleen Wilcox, so Rita Baum.
I'm sorry, Madam Town Manager, could we just be sure that the people who didn't interview or are not entitled, the names are not read, please?
We will do that.
Okay,
Thank you.
Yes, okay. So appointed to the commission would be Rita Baum, Amy Fashnot, and Tom Spilsbury, leaving 2 vacancies. Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission. There is 1 vacancy and 4 applicants. Each council member may have 1 vote. John Adland, Megan Crummett, Zach Marks, Pat Parsenigan. John Adlin is appointed to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. The Building Board of Appeals has 1 vacancy and 3 applicants. Each council member may have 1 vote. Edward Boland, Faith McCarness, Dave Zikovich. So we have a tie. So now we will vote on between Faith and Dave Zikovich. So Faith McCarness and Dave Zikovich. Faith is appointed to the Building Board of Appeals. Community and Senior Services Commission, there are 3 vacancies and 4 applicants. Each council member may have 3 votes. Dave Knapp, Jean Lennon, Lisa Marshik, Berkeley Miller. For that last one, could you leave your hands up, please? Thank you. So Dave Knapp, Lisa Marshik, and Berkeley Miller are appointed. General Plan Committee, there's 1 vacancy and 2 applicants. Each council member may have 1 vote. Matthew Hudes, Matthew Miller.
I don't believe Matthew Miller was eligible since he did not interview.
Okay.
So may we have that called again, please?
Matthew Hudes. So Matthew Hudes is appointed to the General Plan Committee. Historic Preservation Committee, there's 1 vacancy and 2 applicants. Each council member may have 1 vote. Nancy Durham, George Havelka, Lynn Pacheco. Lynn Pacheco is appointed to the Historic Preservation Committee. Library Board has 2 vacancies and 2 applicants. Each council member may have 2 votes. Lynn Doherty, Shelley Katz. Lynn Doherty and Shelley Katz are appointed to the Library Board. Parks Commission has 2 vacancies and 3 applicants. Each council member may have 2 votes, and there are actually 2 applicants now. Matthew Miller did not interview.
Madam Manager, may we have that restated?
Yes, so there are 2 vacancies and 2 applicants. Brant Corinson, Reza Tavana. Brant Corinson and Reza Tavana are appointed to the Parks Commission, leaving 1 vacancy. I'm sorry, no vacancies. Planning Commission, there are 2 vacancies and 5 applicants. Each council member may have 2 votes. Annette Finsterbush, Matthew Hudes, Berkeley Miller, Thomas O'Donnell, Joanne Talasfor. Thomas O'Donnell and Joanne Talasfor are appointed to the Planning Commission.
I think we have a tie between applicant Hudes and Talasfor.
Madam Manager, may we have the votes reported out so we know what to do next?
So we have 3 for Matthew Hudes, 4 for Thomas O'Donnell, and 4 for Joanne Talasfor.
I only saw 3 for, could we revote for,
Yes.
for Joanne?
Okay, so Joanne Talasfor. So 3 votes. Okay. So, Mr. Attorney, I have a question for you. Since Matthew Hudes has been appointed to the General Plan Committee already, and he's in the tie-off for this,
He wouldn't be eligible, I don't believe, under our rules to be on 2 committees, so he's already been appointed to 1. So he's not qualified for this one unless we wanted to change, someone wanted to reconsider their vote for the Plan Committee because they weren't aware of that.
All right, what I'm going to do, given what the attorney just said, we will go back to the General Plan Committee, which currently has 1 vacancy and 1 applicant, Matthew Hudes, who did win in our last vote. And I'm going to ask the clerk to recall the General Plan Committee. Thank you.
okay. General Plan Committee, 1 vacancy, 1 applicant, Matthew Hudes. Okay, 1 vote for Matthew Hudes.
And then if you would recall the Planning Commission?
Yes, ma'am. Planning Commission, 2 vacancies, 5 applicants. Did you want me to read all of the names or just the 3?
At this point, you should read all the names.
Thank you. Annette Finsterbush, Matthew Hudes, Berkeley Miller, Thomas O'Donnell, Joanne Talasfor. So we still have the tie between Matthew and Joanne.
If you could please give us the count on each one.
Matthew Hudes has 3, Joanne Talasfor has 3, Thomas O'Donnell has 4.
So I'm assuming, staff, that we are going to do a vote between Mr. Hudes and Ms. Telesfor?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. So Matthew Hudes. And Joanne Talasfor. So Matthew Hudes has 4, Joanne Talasfor has 1. Thomas O'Donnell and Matthew Hudes are appointed to the Planning Commission, leaving a vacancy on the General Plan Committee.
Madam Manager, I don't believe I heard the Transportation and Parking Commission. Did I miss that?
No, we'll be doing that one next. I was just summarizing those two.
Thank you.
So Transportation and Parking Commission, 3 vacancies and 2 applicants. Each council member may have 3 votes. John Jacobson, Daniel Snyder. So John Jacobson and Daniel Snyder are appointed to the Transportation and Parking Commission, leaving 1 vacancy.
I think we need, let's verify the votes for John Jacobson. On this side, we only saw 2 votes.
So there are 3 vacancies and there's 2 applicants.
Right, but 1 applicant only got 2 votes, at least from what was visible from this side.
Okay. Okay, so John Jacobson. Okay. And Daniel Snyder. Okay. So since John Jacobson did not receive a majority vote, Daniel Snyder is appointed to the Transportation and Parking Commission, leaving 2 vacancies.
Madam Manager, I would ask that we re-advertise for all of the commissions that still need commissioners.
Thank you, we'll do that, and we'll combine that with our spring recruitment for our youth commission.
Thank you. And a big thanks to this council that not only got here early today, but who did a superlative job in efficiently interviewing the candidates. Now we get to do my favorite thing, small business, big applause. I'm going to be coming down there to start this off. Probably the most fun thing a mayor gets to do is award a proclamation to the small business big applause. We get to choose one small business in Los Gatos that has served our community for many, many years. And I was given the opportunity to choose the first business in my tenure, this time as mayor. And I happen to know before they come up that this business has 3 generations of family members here. And so the award is going to go to C.B. Hannigan's, and I'm asking all 3 generations to come up here and stand behind me. Come around behind. That's here's good.
Well, that's not fair. It's 3 to 1.
Log over here.
I'll vote.
Come on up. Now, before I give the mic over to the recipients, I just want to say that I have known Chris and Johnny for a really long time, like since about 1980, when they first got their CUP to operate their business. And I can say in all honesty, because I was on the Planning Commission then, that the relationship did not start out smoothly. But having said that, it was, we worked through it. And they're really a good example of how working with the business, working with the Planning Commission, and working with the council created this great business that has been vital to our community now for 36 years. And as you can see, there's 3 generations of them. And they not only have had a fantastic business of C.B. Hannigan's, but they have been so much a part of our community. They do Claws for a Cause. They do their Irish events. They most recently have been involved in the tree lighting and in our parade. So before I turn this over to them, I want you all to join me in giving them a very big round of applause. And for those of you in the front row, you didn't see, they got a standing ovation. All right, who's speaking for the business?
I think
Why don't you introduce her?
let me, first of all, Chris and I have been not only partners, but we've been best friends for over 35, probably more like 38, 39 years, and it's been a wonderful road. But in trying to get the road going, we couldn't have done it without Chris's mother. She's our touch of class that Chris and I, well, we're not sure we still have it yet, but Mose is the one. When we came with our parents to do C.B. Hannigan's, and the idea was to go ahead and make a place for all of the kids can go, our parents can go, a general meeting place, and we hope it still stands today. And I think it's kind of fun to see all the generations come through, and we're proud of the fact that we have all different families and their kids come in. It's like on the night before Thanksgiving. The grandparents come in, the parents come in, the kids come in. Instead of staying until 2 o'clock, I think we're gone by 9 now. But it couldn't have been done without Mose Dawson. And Mose, you're our touch of a class that we've never had. And I want to introduce you as, my mother's not here, but you're my second mother.
I'm very proud to have been a part of this, standing by and admiring these 2 remarkable men who have retained their friendship and the joy in being with the community for all these years. It is on Friday, I'm the ace volunteer. I'm the assistant to the busboy, and I have a fine time.
Thank you very much. Max?
One last quick word. One of the joys of parenthood is bringing your children into the world that they're not only interesting but self-sustaining, but to have them share in what you enjoy and have loved your whole life, and have one of them come and show me how to really cook and really add and take the whole menu up. Not just a notch, but many, many notches, to have my son Max come on board and take over the kitchen. I don't think anybody in this room will deny the fact that he's an incredible cook and also one of the best. Also a joy to have around. So I feel very, very fortunate not only to have Max and Mose and my best friend Johnny Hannigan and Patty, but to live in this community. It's been joyous. And we're not done yet. Thank you.
And now their proclamation. This is where you have your photo up.
Mose, right over
This way.
here. Get over
Closer
here,
to me.
Mose. A lot of pressure. Does this get us out of any
All right.
taxes or anything?
No, but that's enough pictures. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you all very much. We are now in the council matters, manager matters, and let's start with council matters. Ms. Jensen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On behalf of the Town of Los Gatos, on December 3rd, I went to the Plan Development Advisory Committee, where we are discussing and reviewing our Plan Development Ordinance. And we may be nearing, and also the Vice Mayor was there, we may be nearing an agreement and recommendation with respect to the ordinance at least. On December 9th, along with the Mayor, I was at the CDAC, where we discussed potential applications for subdivision of property on Greenridge Terrace and on Camino del Cerro. And yesterday, I was at the Route 85 Policy Advisory Committee, consisting of many jurisdictions, where we attempted to come up with a plan of action and what our goals and objectives are with respect to getting a study done of Route 85 and our transportation options. And we do not yet have another meeting scheduled.
Thank you. Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I did several things. I attended the Los Gatos Education Foundation Appreciation Event. I think all the council was there. Also attended the youth parade, of which all the council was there. I also attended the Cities Association holiday dinner on December 3rd. And I did a Christmas tree lighting at the terraces with the Vice Mayor, where we also sang songs afterwards. Nobody warned us we were going to roped into songs when we went, I think. We sang quietly, though, so we didn't disturb anybody. And then I got invited to a breakfast for a new organization I hadn't heard of before called FLY, which is Fresh Lifelines for Youth, which I wanted to share with you. It's an organization that works with youth that are either incarcerated or on probation or at-risk high schools, where they assign mentors to them to help them go through the whole court process and feel like they have somebody on their side. And these, there was a lot of testimonials from these mentors about how persistent, or actually these kids that had recovered, how persistent the mentors were, and they, it really made a difference. So I wanted to mention that. And I also attended the VTA PAC as an observer. I'm an alternate, and I so went as an observer to that.
Thank you. As has already been mentioned, I was at the CDAC, the tree lighting, the parade, and the LGEF function. Ms. Sayak.
Okay. In addition to those already mentioned, on December 8th, there was a North and West Valley Mayor's meeting to discuss regional transportation issues. I went with our town manager on behalf of Mayor Spector. On December 9th was Chamber of Commerce's pedestrian safety flag unveiling. And as Councilmember Rennie said, we both participated with the terraces tree lighting.
On last Wednesday, I chaired the West Valley Sanitation District Board of Directors, and the primary order of business was a closed session item in which the board took action to allow our district to issue a grievance letter to the city of San Jose between the sanitation district and the city of San Jose regarding the business agreement we have between those two agencies, which is quite a few years old. It dates back to the early 80s, and there's some differences of opinion on that. I also attended an event at Assemblymember Lowe's office, a holiday event, the parade, the tree lighting, and the Saratoga mayoral swearing in, as well as the Treatment Plant Advisory Committee, which I have been appointed to for now the second year in a row.
Thank you. Manager matters.
Thank you. I have two announcements for you this evening. Starting tomorrow through Friday, we will be doing book drop construction at our library, so there will be some alternate places for people to drop off their books during open hours as well as during the closed hours. And then I wanted to announce our town closure in observance of the holidays starting on December 24th and continuing through the new year. We will be reopened for full service on Monday, January 4th, and the library reopens on Saturday, the 2nd of January. Happy holidays.
Thank you. We are now at consent calendar items. These items will all be acted upon in one motion unless someone from the council or someone from the audience removes an item from the consent calendar. Does anyone from the council wish to remove an item from the consent calendar? Seeing none, does anyone from... Oh, Mr. Leonardis, sorry.
Mayor, I do not wish to remove an item from the consent calendar, but I have been appointed to the Treatment Plan Advisory Committee, so I think it should be incorporated into the spreadsheet of the council appointments. And this was an appointment by the board of the West Valley Sanitation District Board of Directors, so it would not have been a council appointment, but because I am serving on that now, and it's the second year in a row, I think it should be added to the spreadsheet.
All right, and I don't have any objection. I would just look to staff to see if that's how we do it.
We'll be happy to do so.
All right. So Mr. Leonardis just appointed himself to a committee, but we're okay. So does anyone from the audience wish to remove an item from the consent calendar? Seeing no one, may I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. I think we are at verbal communications, yes. We are now at verbal communications, where anyone in the audience can address the council on an item or items that is not on our agenda this evening. And if you're going to speak to this, please submit one of these cards. And Ms. Dorner, I have a card from you. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, I'm Angelia Dorner, a proud resident of the Almond Grove. At the October 20th meeting, I asked a critical question about if we were in lockstep with the utility companies in connection with this project. Staff said that they had sent out correspondence to the utilities and that they had said that the way the design was put together, they would not need to do any relocation, that they had already done some work at Bachman and Massal, but that everything else had been done. So I requested copies of this correspondence. I received a response saying that they needed more time to search their records, and such would be made available no later than December 23rd. I expected that such correspondence would have been readily accessible. I have some ideas as to why, but I'll let you think up your own. Over the last year, I have repeatedly asked for this kind of information about our utilities. Staff's remarks only referred to no need to relocate, but what about these other types of information? Information which I believe are critical when planning this project, as well as for you to make an educated decision about pavement choice. What's really also very disappointing to the residents is that no one has ever collaborated with the utilities about what kinds of upgrades or other improvements could be made since the streets are going to be torn open. Residents have been asking for conduits for even empty, for fiber or other new technologies that might be put in down the road. Also early on, residents were told that there would be no opportunity for undergrounding of utilities. But the word on the street, or excuse me, word on the facility, is that it is being done on Broadway. If that's true, why would that not surprise me? You know, I got on the website late this afternoon and noticed that the RFP for design on the remaining 8 streets had been issued. I haven't read it all, but here are a few things that I wanted to share with you. Right off the top, the future design consultant will have to coordinate with all utilities, including location and evaluation of existing utilities. That's right, nothing has ever even been discussed about the other 8 streets with the utilities. Curbs and gutters refer to those that do not match the proposed grades. I found it alarming that the same thing is said about the sidewalks. Are we talking about raising our sidewalks again? Analyzing storm drainage and design upgrades, even though there are no funds for a new drainage system. What was done in the Broadway and Bachman designs? Are such upgrades incorporated into the Phase 1 project costs? And finally, the consultant is to provide construction management and administration for the project. which, using town staff's current estimates, is over $1 million. There's just a lot of things in this RFP that sort of alarm me. Like I say, I've not read it all, but these are just a few of the highlights. I'm not sure if anyone has been involved with reviewing the RFP or what the status will be going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no other cards, and so that is the closing verbal communications. Going on to other business. Agenda item 9 is to provide direction regarding the 2016 Music in the Park Summer Concert Series. And before I turn this over to staff, by way of background, I asked that this item be placed on the agenda because I was concerned that this council has not made any decisions one way or the other with regard to music in the park, whether they want it, whether they don't want it, if they want it, under what terms. And it was my understanding that if we did want to do something, our time frame was running out, and as it turns out, that is the truth. That is accurate. So that was my reason for bringing this forward, and now I will turn to staff for the staff report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Christina Gilmore, Assistant to the Town Manager. The item you have before you this evening is to discuss and provide direction regarding the 2016 Music in the Park Concert Series. I would also like to advise the Council that a desk item was distributed this afternoon on this item. So as the mayor mentioned, the Music in the Park series, concert series has been an annual summer concert event that's been held in the Civic Center grounds since 1988. In 2009, the council contracted with Los Gatos Music and Arts to administer and produce the concert series for a 5-year contract. That contract was expired, did become expired last year in 2014, and in May of this year, this council extended the agreement with Los Gatos Music and Arts to produce the summer concert series through the summer of 2015. This fall in September, that organization approached the town and let us know that as of January 2016, they would no longer be producing the summer concert series, as they will be primarily focusing their efforts on their other music concert series, Jazz on the Plaza. So this evening, per the mayor's request, we have brought forth to you a series of questions about the future of this event, as well as a series of recommendations, staff recommendations. These are just ideas that staff thought about to bring forward for council consideration. Of course, these are just recommendations for ideas. This is not a limited list, and if the council so chooses to direct staff to go in another direction, they may do so. So that concludes the report. Staff is available to answer any questions.
Questions of staff? A lot. Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Ms. Gilmore, what is the current business arrangement with the town of Los Gatos and Los Gatos Music and Arts for not only music in the park, but for Jazz in the Plaza? Do we have any kind of written agreement or special event permits or things which occur to even authorize them to operate either of these programs on any kind of level?
Thank you for the question. So Los Gatos Music and Arts did enter into a 5-year agreement, which was extended for 1 additional year for 2015 with the town to put on music in the park. The Jazz in the Plaza Summer Concert Series is put on every year through a special permit. So they apply for a special permit through the town, which the town administers, and that is the agreement that the town has for the Jazz in the Plaza. So it's a separate agreement from the Music in the Park Summer Concert Series.
Mr. Leonardis.
One follow-up. Thank you, Mayor. So the special permit, has it been issued for 2016 for Jazz on the Plaza?
I'm not certain. I believe usually at the beginning of the year, that's when the town staff will initiate conversations with any of the organizing groups who plan on putting on events for the upcoming year. So I can't answer that question with certainty, but if they have not submitted an application, I anticipate they would be shortly.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Ms. Gilmore, I have 2 questions. The first, thank you for all the different options that you've identified. If my first priority / objective is to ensure that we do have a Music in the Park this summer for 2016, realistically, for time frame, requesting an RFP would delay us to a point where we would not see it this year. Is that correct?
Based on the limited information that we have from Los Gatos Music and Arts, they have traditionally started their recruitment process for bands in the January timeframe to plan for a summer concert series. So using their baseline timeline, if we were to issue an RFP, that could put us behind for several weeks. We don't know as of yet. We don't have any parameters for an RFP, and that's why we're asking the council for direction if that is an option the council would like to pursue. So we would have to put together an RFP and see what type of response we would get, and then put together also an evaluation process. And then once a vendor or an entity was chosen through the evaluation process, that would have to come back to the council for review and approval for an agreement. So that could potentially take several weeks, if not a few months.
Okay. And then my second question, the second bullet, request interested entities. Does the town know of any interested entities that we could work with to produce a 2016 series?
So the town has been approached by the new museum, Los Gatos. They have expressed an interest in talking to the town about putting on some sort of event, if not necessarily a summer concert series. We do understand that they were going to be meeting with their board of directors to understand if that is something that they would still wish to go forward with. We have not received any additional information. We've only had exploratory conversations with that group as of now.
Thank you.
Further questions? Ms. Jensen.
A couple, if I may. First, a follow-up on the Vice Mayor's question regarding, assuming the council wanted to maintain what people have become known as Music in the Park, and we did not have a promoter, how would the town imagine that it would go through that process? We have budget constraints, we have all kinds of staff issues. How would the staff go about putting on a concert series, or could the staff put on a concert series if it was a Los Gatos event?
So if the council did choose to go with that last option where the town would assume the responsibility of producing the event, that would have to be an item that would be budgeted so that we could have the resources available to not only staff that event, but also choose vendors or musical acts. Those costs we don't have identified, so staff would have to do some additional research to come back to council with some numbers if that is an option the council wanted to pursue.
Okay. And my second question, with respect to the second bullet in asking for proposals, assuming that the council was interested in having proposals from multiple entities, not necessarily just the museum, and not necessarily just music or whatever the museum had in mind, how would the town go about publicizing the availability of sponsoring that kind of a program or event?
We would use our usual communication avenues that are available to us, the town website. We could issue a press release. We could advertise through our social media accounts as well as through our What's New. So that would be the first route that we would go through, and then through the process, if we identified other communication vehicles, we would certainly utilize those.
And one last thing. Jazz in the Plaza is by special event permit. It doesn't have a contract. If the town said, we're going to issue a special event permit for every Sunday or whatever, people could come up and just say, yeah, on Sunday I want to put on whatever, without going through this process and formalizing it. Not suggesting that that's a great idea. I just want to see if that could happen.
So that's precisely the type of direction we would like to receive from the council. How would you like to proceed? If an event such as Music in the Park was to continue in the future, would it continue through a special event permit? Would the council prefer to contract with an organization to put on all of the events? Does the council prefer to go some other option? So that's the type of direction we're looking for the council to provide.
Thank you.
Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sitting here listening to the other questions, mine are multiplying. First of all, if we went with option 2 with the proposals, we'd still have a contract, correct?
Correct.
So then why, I guess I want to understand better, why would we do an RFP versus not an RFP? Is RFP just help give people an idea of what we want to see versus we just take whatever comes to us?
That's precisely, I think, the meaning behind the recommendation. So the council could, if they chose to go with item number 1, option number 1, you could give us a set of parameters that need to be included into an RFP, and that way we would clearly outline the expectations. That could be anything from hours, it could be days of the week, the number of summer concerts, to performance standards. So that would be included in the RFP. So for any responsive bidders, they would understand precisely upfront what the town's expectations are, in addition to any monetary value that the council wanted to assign to this. If the council decides to go with option number 2 and just say that we are seeking proposals, then it would be much more fluid. The staff and the council would have to sort through those proposals and do an analysis and come up with a recommendation based on whatever the council desires. So an RFP would be far more defined. Option number 2 would be a little bit more fluid. Either option could work. It just depends upon the desire of the council.
2 more questions. So following up on one of Mrs. Councilwoman Jensen's question, where if anybody could just get a permit, I thought the Civic Center had to be a town-sponsored event. So actually they couldn't do it on the Civic Center just getting a permit, correct?
So our current policy does state that the Civic Center lawn should be a co-sponsored, town co-sponsored event. I know that the mayor has agendized for February a special event discussion where that issue would be an issue that we would bring forward to the council for discussion. So if the council desires to follow the current policy in place in anticipation that that policy may change in the future, that would be direction we would need to get from the council. We just really do need some defined direction from the council about how you like to proceed. If the council chooses to do a special event by special event permit process for the summer concert series, and that is something that staff would be willing to explore.
One more. So in terms of if the town took this over and maybe if we contract out, both fall under the case where versus if we had some nonprofit organization running it for us. My understanding is nonprofit organization can have sponsors and fundraise using sponsors, but as soon as the town runs this, we now have to come up with pretty much all the cash out of our pocket. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Let me follow up on a question that I think following up on Mr. Rennie or Ms. Jensen. I was thinking that the only one of our options that you've given us that could possibly fly if we wanted to have any chance of music in the park would be B. And then I was thinking, well, do we need one entity? Maybe we can get around one entity with a request for proposal, RFP, not an RFP, just a regular special permit. But I'm hearing now is that we can't do a special permit. You're saying we might be able to reconsider this in February, but I know from what you've written and from my life experience that we're going to be running out of time to get performers. So right now, if we wanted to do something by the town, it could not include a special permit. Is that correct? On the front lawn.
So let me see if I understand your question. So your question is, if the town wanted to move forward with music in the park, if it wasn't an RFP and it wasn't a town co-sponsored event, it could not happen. Is that your question?
No, that's right. Let's go with that one.
Okay. So As I mentioned before, we do have a policy, a town-wide policy in place for co-sponsorship for certain town properties. One is Oak Meadow Park, the second is the Plaza Park, and then the third is the Civic Center lawn. So per that policy, the town does state very clearly that any events that are held on those properties must be a town co-sponsored event.
Could we have a special permit? What I'm trying to do is see if I can separate the whole summer into one Sunday. So could we have a special permit where the town is a co-sponsor in the sense of it's our lawn?
I'm going to defer to the town manager.
So there are a couple of options to be thinking about this. One is, what do we do for 2016? So we have music immediately, and then we can figure out the longer term plan another night. So one option, and we did get this comment from the community, is that if we could streamline our selection process by just accepting submittals and then negotiating a contract, assuming that there were maybe only one person who would submit at this late date, that we could then expedite a contract coming to you for a music series of some sort for the summer. So that's one option. Another option is that someone could come forward and apply for multiple special event permits, essentially saying that they would, and maybe we could even look at how we could streamline that they would say 6 or 8 Sundays they would like to do music. What can the town do to consolidate its permitting to do a more rapid process of that? We could do that, but for the use of our town facility, we would probably still want to bring some type of, whether it's a formal contract or at least some operational points to the council's attention, just so that way we would know what the town would be involved in with respect to its own facility. So a special permit could be an approach, but what we're finding is that in any event, we would probably need some kind of written agreement just to make sure that we understand roles and responsibilities of the parties.
Thank you. Other council questions? Mr. Leonardis?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Spector. So as it stands now, say with Jazz in the Plaza, they come in every single week and they just get a special event permit, or they haven't even been doing that?
No, my understanding of the Jazz in the Plaza event is that they apply at the beginning of the year for one special event permit for their concert series. And I don't recall how many concerts they have in their Jazz in the Plaza series, but they are issued one permit that encompasses the entire series for that calendar year.
So one follow-up, if I may, and perhaps this might be for the town attorney. I guess if you have a concert series that's been going on for 10 years and it's 10 summers during the summer every single year, how does that constitute a special event as opposed to, say, an ongoing event? What would preclude a member of the public from saying, nope, I want that park on this Wednesday in the middle of summer, and also applying for a permit?
My recommendation would be that we do enter into an agreement instead of a special events permit, because right now, because a special event hasn't been issued for 2016, you're absolutely right. Someone could come in and ask to use that park on a Wednesday evening before the Jazz in the Plaza has reserved it, and that's why the agreement, if that's the way council wants to go and make sure it's reserved for the Jazz in the Plaza, that you do a long-term agreement. So when it comes back in February, that's definitely going to be my recommendation, because as you just mentioned, it's not a one-time special event permit that we normally see when it's continually goes on, and it should be an agreement that we make sure we know what the parties' responsibilities and duties are.
Thank you.
And may I add, Councilmember, Plaza Park does fall under the policy that it must be a town co-sponsored event. So the town is a co-sponsor with Los Gatos Music and Arts to put on Jazz in the Plaza as well as Music in the Park. And the town portion that we contribute is in-kind donation of staff time to the Jazz in the Plaza. And so we are listed as a sustaining sponsor, I believe, on all of their materials.
Mr. Leonardis?
Thank you, Mayor Spector. So thank you, Ms. Gilmore, for that comment. But essentially what it comes down to, and without the absence of an agreement, is kind of the town gifting public funds to one special interest concert series. And I know we have a lot of needs in this community, such as, you name it, LGEF, art docents and things such as that. And I guess it's interesting that we're doing that without any kind of a formal agreement. So I'll just...
Thank
Ms. Sayak?
Yes. So, Ms. Gilmore, so my understanding is Los Gatos Music and Arts, who puts together both Music in the Park and Jazz in the Plaza, they'd like to move away from Music in the Park to focus on jazz. Has there been any discussion to do a transition so that they could help whatever entity we use so that we have something for the summer instead of starting from ground zero?
So in the town's conversations with the board members of the Los Gatos Music and Arts, they have expressed to us their willingness to help transition their knowledge base on putting on that summer concert series to any entity who would be chosen to take it over. So they're willing to mentor, to share their information. However, they have made it clear that as far as producing the Music in the Park event, that is not something they are willing to do after 2015 concludes, and that they would like to focus on their primary event, which is Jazz in the Plaza.
Ms. Jensen?
Thank you. I wanted to go back to the notion of town sponsorship. You said that the town sponsorship for Jazz in the Plaza is in-kind staff. So I'm assuming that sponsorship can take any kind of form, not necessarily dollars or a payment or whatever. So if the town decides that it will print a sign that says Los Gatos and whatever entity it is, that for whatever event it is, that qualifies theoretically, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Council, other questions? We do have a speaker on this. Thank you. All right, I only have one card, so if anyone wants to speak, please submit a card. Bob Long. Okay, why don't you wait till you're at the microphone because we have to all hear you.
All right, I apologize. Thank you for the moment in the limelight here. And I might start by explaining the genealogy of some of this communications. And for those that don't know me, I tonight, not only as a citizen, but as a member of the new museum board, I'm speaking to you, but formerly as a Morning Rotary board member and a community foundation board member with Mr. Nordmo and Councilman Rennie. And so what happened was I, through Terry Hope, part of Music and Arts, and the contract that you've just heard about, and longer than that, the 28-year history or 27-year history, her involvement, she mentioned to me casually and socially that this was coming to end of term. And I'm a very recent museum board member, so I brought this to Lisa Casino, our executive director, and to our president, Barney Davidge. And so I speak, with quotes, and on behalf of the New Mu board, because I have told Barney, hey, I'm kind of a booster of this, right? I would like to see it happen. I don't want to see us miss the 2016 season. So I asked Terry to come in and speak to an optional, kind of ad hoc museum board meeting and take questions. We've looked at her budget. We've looked it all over, and my particular bent on this is having brought it to our operations director Kimberly Snyder and Lisa first. I saw them kind of light up. So the board is waiting for more information per what I might bring back tonight or you will publish later. However, we're, on my part at least, extremely interested in this transition. Terry and Jonathan, I've spoken to them privately, and Jonathan only has one request. He hopes the volunteers can be honored at some point. And Terry gives us a full year of support and transition. And so it's quite clear, that we know what bands even, so that's my minute left. We have an idea how we might take this from 10 weeks to 8 weeks and do a couple things, maybe an educational backbone to it because the museum theme or mission is education. So whereas the music starts at 5, typically we might at 4 o'clock have some connected educational hour for kids, let's say. It connects museum exhibits, which Woody Guthrie is included right now if you go by. So this falls under our definition, by pretty solid agreement on the board, and there's no adverse opinions, only asking for more information. And so in terms of your bullets, I can share one thing, I believe very politely and speaking for the entire board, the RFP process could be complicated, and as mentioned already, we might fail to meet the dates. So if we fall into bullet 2, it'd be perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Mr. Long, I'm a little confused about what more information do they need? Usually we would give an RFP, but now you're saying an RFP takes too long. So what form is this information we're giving?
If bullet 1, the RFP is issued, and let's say whatever the response time might be, 2 to 8 weeks, I don't know, it immediately places us in a position where we might be starting our pursuit of talent, the bands, in February, let's say. So we start, half a step behind. So only by keeping with what Terry Hope has carefully explained to us is their set of milestones. If we're in keeping with that, without the RFP and the delay, the museum feels we have the resources and the capacity.
So that didn't really answer my question.
Sorry.
What kind of information do they need?
That we're not going with an RFP.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other questions? Ms. Sayak?
What I'm trying to get a sense from, what I'd like to know is, when you and your board members envision what you would like music in the park to see, would it be significantly different from what the town residents anticipate and expect every Sunday when they show up at 5 o'clock, or would it be quite similar?
Very similar from a casual standpoint, but for example, there are some ethnic bands that are extremely popular. You can't get within 2 blocks of here. So we assume that's what the community wants. So, and this is not coming strictly from the board of the museum being brand new to this, but rather this is what Terry has brought to our attention, and we thought this was a great idea.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Long.
Thank you very much.
No one else has submitted a card, and I see no one running forward to the mic, and so I'm going to close the public testimony portion of our hearing and go back to the council for discussion, motion, direction. Mr. Leonardis?
Thank you, Mayor Spector. And I feel very fortunate that I worked on music in the park for 3 seasons and jazz for about 5 seasons. So I'm very familiar with the programs and how they work. And I was really not aware that we had no formal agreements until earlier this year when Los Gatos Music and Arts decided that they didn't want to do music in the park on Sundays anymore. And it was disappointing to me because it's a very well-attended community event, and a lot of people look forward to going out there on a weekly basis and enjoying themselves and enjoying our community. When it comes to the future, I think we need to have something more formal, and I would be supportive of the idea of submitting an RFP for both programs. And if Los Gatos Music and Arts or the new museums want to come back and submit their proposals through the RFP process, that would be wonderful. But I don't understand why an RFP process would take that long for what this is. It was quite simple, really. When I was part of the program, we had about 5 key volunteers, and we booked the bands, and we hired a sound guy, and we set up some easy ups, and the people came out, and it wasn't that complicated. Yes, we had a few sponsors, of course, as well to help fund the program, but this doesn't have to be some complicated ordeal to submit an RFP, in my opinion. There are a lot of other communities in the Bay Area who have music programs, and we have ours on Sunday. A lot of them have theirs during the week, and I think we have an advantage of having it on Sunday. We never had problems booking musicians. So I do agree with the concept of starting them earlier in the season, but I know there were musicians that were booked very late last season by Los Gatos Music and Arts. So I see at this point no disadvantage to just going with a formal RFP program and moving forward in that respect and having formal written agreements for these music programs. Because as I stated earlier, somebody could just go out and pull a permit for the park, the plaza, and start juggling out there on Wednesday night, and Jazz might think that they were entitled to it automatically, and they're not, the way it stands. So I think it's important to finally get this nailed down rightly so. And in addition to that, I mean, we have to be very careful as a community who and what we give away our public assets to for free, whether it be our personnel, our town employees, our park rangers, our police officers, our parking control officers writing tickets, or whether it be people setting up chairs in a public park and effectively charging admissions to get into that park. In light of giving those seats away to sponsors. So what's has been occurring is a good portion of the parks have been disallowed to the public, and I have received complaints from many members of the public about that practice. So I would like to see some change moving forward about some of these things, because it's just not right for, without any kind of council policy or council ordinance, for essentially a music program that just shows up every week and essentially crashes the park and charges admission for it, for lack of a better explanation. I understand, yes, they have one permit they might file at the beginning of the season, but technically you're supposed to do one each and every week, I think, for that park. That's the way the law is written, and I don't think you can call it a special event permit, using a special event permit process to have an ongoing annual concert series is the right approach.
Thank you. Mr. Rennie?
Thank you, Mayor Spector. I'll try to keep it a little shorter. My first thought is I find that music in the park is an important enrichment for a community. I have volunteered also several seasons there, so I'd like to see us save music in the park. Mr. Leonardis said that there's nothing formal, but we did have a contract, so that's very formal. It just happened to not been renewed last season, so maybe it was not formal last season, but it was definitely formal. So I don't think I see the need for an RFP, which makes it a lot more complicated. I also see he's lumping together Jazz and the Plaz just because it's run by the same people, which he doesn't like. Jazz on the Plaz is not really a town-sponsored event. Well, the Music in the Park has been. We contributed funds to Music in the Park. It was started originally by the Arts Commission, so it came out of the town, and then was handed off to this nonprofit organization because they were able to run it better. They're able to raise funds. So I see a difference between that. If we start saying we have to have an RFP for Jazz and the Plaz, then we're going to have an RFP for Fiesta de Arts and an RFP for all the other events in town. I think that that's not necessary.
Ms. Jensen?
I wanted to try a motion, if I may.
You'd never hear me say no.
I appreciate the comments of my fellow council members. I would make a motion that the council proceed with what's item B in our staff report on page 2, and which is the second bullet on the slide, which is to request information from interested entities and not do an RFP for the reasons that Ms. Gilmore stated, that an RFP is very specific. And I think it's important for the town always to be looking at new ideas, new things. And if music in the park or a reasonable facsimile is the right thing, somebody can propose that. If something different is the right thing, we can get a proposal for that. It gives us the opportunity to view it as a special event, not necessarily do a contract for continuing events. It gives us the opportunity to look at potentially different vendors, different organizers, different events that people in town may enjoy. So I think we should get information and get proposals. And the other thing about the RFP is I do think it's a long process, and it locks us into a particular end, which we may not want to do. I appreciate Councilman Leonardis's desire to have a contract for continuing events. It makes total sense, but that's not what's before us tonight, and I think it makes sense to discuss that in the context of the special event permitting, as Mr. Schultz said. So my motion is for the council to direct staff to go with item B, bullet number 2.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Ms. Hayek?
I'll second the motion, but if I could make a friendly amendment to add on.
All right, you would make a motion to amend.
I make a motion to amend. If I'd like to ensure that staff advertise this and just publicize to our town residents that there is a potential change to our music in the park. I don't think many people realize this, and as I mentioned earlier, many people come on Sunday at 5 o'clock in the summer expecting a music concert. And if it's somewhat different, I think we ought to be able to say that to our public now, that there are some changes, these are the reasons why, but yes, we are working on providing another musical venue for you this summer.
Thank you. Ms. Jensen, maker of the motion, you have a request or an amendment that you change your motion to include publicizing of possible changes to music in the park.
Very good. I was getting ready to summarize it myself, but you've done it. Yes.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. I'll discuss. I'm going to support the motion. For what we're doing, given the time frame that we have, I think this is the only methodology that possibly allows us to have music this coming summer, and that would be an objective. The RFPs are detailed, they do take time, and maybe down the line we will do an RFP, but I don't think now in December, when we have to get this all rolling, probably in January is the time. Further discussion? Hearing none? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Agenda item 10. Possible separation of parking requirements and seating capacities. And I see we have someone all ready to make the staff report.
Good evening, Monica Wren, Economic Vitality Manager. Before you tonight is a report discussing the potential separation of parking requirements to seating capacities. Currently in town, the seats are regulated based on the number of parking spaces that an establishment has. At a study session in November, excuse me, the council had talked about bringing this back to council for discussion and asked that the parking assessment district owners were notified and surveyed. Staff did do that, and of the 230 property owners, we received responses from 14. Staff would note that even if the seats are decoupled from the parking, it would in no way change the number of parking credits that anybody has for their building or their property in the former assessment district. We're looking tonight for your direction. If you are interested in decoupling the seats from the parking requirements, then we would staff would go ahead and do a little more work on getting some specifics for you, drafting an ordinance amendment, and then putting that through the full process of the Planning Commission, then back to the council for the final review. We do want to note that so in our haste to get the addendum out, Joel and I just realized that there was an error on the chart that we gave you, and this kind of illustrates the difficulty to go ahead and do all the work ahead of learning what your preferences are. When you look at maximum fire code occupancy, it is one person per 15 square feet in the dining area. So that doesn't take into account the kitchen space and all of that. That's calculated differently. So that doesn't mean that a business would necessarily run their business at that rate, but that potentially is what the fire marshal would allow the number of people in that space. And so we wanted to clarify that it is dining area and not gross square footage. Both Joel and I are here if you have any questions on the remaining of the report.
Questions of staff? Ms. Syak.
I do have a question, and it's more process related. Now, I understand if, based on tonight's discussion, if there are certain agreements that we come with, staff could go back to draft an ordinance that would then go through the process of planning commission and then back to council. And I want to follow a lot of the other things that we've done with economic vitality. What if we wanted to do a test pilot of some sort, 6 months of let's see what happens if we decouple? Does that still have to go through the same process, or can we create a test policy, get it going, and then actually see what happens? What are the consequences?
So this is restricted by the town code, so it's my understanding that the only thing we could do would be a code amendment. So if it didn't work, we could obviously go back and do another code amendment. We could take it out of the code and then do a policy on top of that so that you had the ability. Is that incorrect? Oh, okay. Or we could go back and then do a policy if you wanted to have the more fluidity to change it.
Okay, so
Ms. Syak?
let me see if I can restructure that. If I wanted fluidity and something that we can try sooner rather than through a longer process, what would you recommend?
So one option would be to suspend certain provisions of the town code. That in itself would take a town code amendment, and then you would need to articulate specifically what you are trying to do during the suspension and what the replacement rules, if any, that would be in place. And that would essentially be a town code process, planning commission hearing and council action.
Ms. Jensen.
I just want to follow up on that a little bit, if I may. So the suspension of an ordinance would still require that it go through the planning commission, et cetera. So we wouldn't save any time if we did that. We wouldn't be able to do the test process that Vice Mayor has in mind, essentially.
That's correct.
Is-
Because it's your zoning code, state law even mandates that zoning changes go through your planning commission. So the idea of maybe just doing a suspension, though, is good because you could put parameters on there that it's good for 6 months or it's 12 months. So it's more like a pilot program as opposed to changing all the code amendments and general plan. You do have to have the 2 readings, though. I don't see any way we could say this was some type of urgency ordinance that you can do in one time by 4/5 vote, but it just, I don't see how we would make those findings that there's some urgency that's needed. So you do have to have both your readings. But by doing a type of suspension, I think it's easier to word for us to come up with those code amendments because it's just a short term what you're trying to accomplish. So it might be easier from a staff level to come up with those changes.
Follow up?
Ms. Jensen?
So you anticipated my question regarding the urgency ordinance. However, one of the things that was mentioned was a policy on top of an ordinance. Could the town write a policy that was somehow superseding or on top of the ordinance that said, okay, we've got this ordinance, except that here's our brand new policy? And then get around to suspending it, or changing it at some point. I'm just trying to figure out how we can have the most flexibility.
Instead of changing an ordinance, I believe we could come back with just an ordinance from council declaring that we would not enforce certain provisions of our ordinance for a period of time, and therefore they would not be enforceable from a code enforcement standpoint. I don't like that way of going about it because you're not giving the public the ability. One of the reasons why you have ordinances is because you do go through that public process so that the community knows and hears about it and has the ability both at the planning and the commission. But I've seen where we have had an ordinance and, well, my perfect example is an ordinance that, marijuana, when it was first coming out, there was actually ordinance that were passed by the council telling the police department to not enforce, to give it the lowest priority possible to enforce the marijuana arrests in their towns because they were promoting the medical marijuana. So it'd be the same. We would come back with a policy saying the enforcement of seating is the lowest priority possible, meaning that we weren't going to enforce those provisions of the ordinance. So I have seen that done, but I don't think it's the best solution. I think it would be better to go through the process.
Ms. Jensen.
Sorry, just one final follow-up on that. So the businesses that are operating now under CUP that has parking linked to seats, their conditions of operation would not change at all pending this process, and then the council will give you direction on whether we wanted to go towards you bringing us back proposed language, or we wanted you to go towards a possible suspension of certain of the sections relating to that, and that would go through the process, and we'd figure that out? Is that how it would work?
Yes.
The options?
And we do have a placeholder. In January, we have the formula retail ordinance going to Planning Commission. We could potentially put this on that same agenda. If you wanted to make an ordinance change, it could go to Planning Commission as early as January 13th, and then come back to you as early as February 2nd.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions of staff? Seeing none, thank you. I have no cards. Is there anybody who wants to address the council on this agenda item? Seeing no one, I will close the public testimony part of our hearing and look to the council for discussion motion. Well, I'll discuss then. I think that what the council could do this evening, based upon the information it has, is make a decision as to whether or not it wants to consider decoupling parking from seats from parking, or seats from some other methodology, such as the fire requirements. And we could send that issue to the Planning Commission. It could get to the Planning Commission in January. So that's where I see the core of what the council could do this evening. Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. It sounds like a good idea. In principle, I just have reservations about it. I know that a lot of the business owners have already kind of done their own decoupling by adding more seats beyond what their CUP requirements may allow. But without a firm commitment on a future parking garage, I'm kind of hesitant about moving forward with anything in this regard.
I'll recognize myself again. I thought it was a really good staff report. I thought the information was very helpful. I thought that the data we got with regard to other jurisdictions and whether or not they had one parking space for 3 seats, one parking space for 4 seats, the fact that the fire code was used in several jurisdictions, many of which were outside of Santa Clara County. But I just thought the comparison of what we do here versus what they do in other locations was helpful. I also think that how many seats you have, how many seats you allow, and whether you take parking into consideration or not is very much a local issue. You might have some place like Lompoc that wants to have tons of cars come in, but they don't have tons of cars coming, so they base their seating on the fire code. But you might have someplace else like Los Altos that doesn't have that same objective. I see the seating parking issue as a very, very, very local issue, which is why if this council wants to consider the decoupling, that it be vetted by the Planning Commission. Ms. Jensen.
So I'll just weigh in. I think the council should explore decoupling it. There's many other jurisdictions that do it that way. Sort of in response, or not really in response to what Councilman Leonardis said, we've had speakers from the downtown tell us that what is important to them is that we have very clear rules, that they are enforceable and that they apply across the board so that everybody knows what to do. If the CUPs are being observed more in the breach than in the obedience, then there's something wrong and we need to fix that. So if the way to do that is to say to this council to say, we would like to consider decoupling it, and we would like everybody to do the research necessary and present the ideas that I think Ms. Wren was talking about, to do the extra work that needs to be done. So for example, I know the count on our comparison jurisdiction chart, it said Campbell has a rule of one seat per, 4 seats per one party, except that it's all enmeshed in a code section that requires shared parking. And it gives credit if you have shared parking, and it requires agreement. So it's not quite right that it's 1 to 4 in Campbell, because they're requiring other creative ideas. So I would like to see it get vetted. I'd like to see this being taken up. I disagree with the mayor in that we'll just send it back and say that the council says, think about decoupling it. I think it makes sense to say, and here are some, if staff is saying they're prepared to propose ordinance language, say, and here's some ideas for how it might work if it were decoupled, so that at least they can be on the floor and be discussed. So that would be the kind of thing that I would be hopeful that we would do.
Further discussion? Ms. Sayak.
So I absolutely believe that we should decouple parking from seats. I think that we've heard enough testimony from many of our merchants downtown that, one, the CUPs that we've been setting haven't even been followed, and that what we've also heard is that the merchants want some flexibility in how they can adapt to the changing economies, changing marketplace, changing desires of the merchants. And the reason why I brought up the process issue is, if we realize that retail, restaurant, everything is changing, I'm concerned that an ordinance with such specificity will just constantly keep us in a reactive mode. Whereas if you have something as broad as a policy that can be fluid and change depending on what we're actually seeing with our downtown and our commercial centers, we can be more adaptable. What I've also heard from testimony is that if we do something as wild and say, let's go with the fire code, we really aren't going to be getting restaurant owners that will maximize the seats, because they also want an ambiance and an environment that's comfortable, and most likely they won't get restaurant patrons who will want to sit shoulder to shoulder to each other. So what I'm looking for is I'm looking for an opportunity to allow the restaurant owners to figure out what exactly is the ideal seat count for them to maximize their revenue, which is a high priority for them, but for us also to see what works best for our downtown. I'm concerned that if we limit it, whether it's square footage or seating allowance or parking spaces, we're just creating this artificial boundary of what a restaurant should actually be. And the patrons are the ones who actually decide for themselves based on what's provided. So I'm looking for staff to give me this option that gives me the most flexibility. And right now, all I can say is I want to decouple it. I don't know which of these boxes is the right one, but I want us to move forward. So I don't know if that helps, but that's where I'm at.
Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. With respect to the Vice Mayor's comments, yes, restaurants are one type of business downtown, but you also have shopkeepers and you have a finite amount of parking places, and you also have a lot of employees that work downtown. So yes, right now we are de facto decoupled. That means there's an issue with the policy or the ordinance, but really I think it comes down to we need a bigger bucket to hold more. We can decouple. I don't think that will solve the problem. It could make things worse by allowing people to add seats. And I agree with free markets and letting restaurant owners decide and having the flexibility in changing business models and such. But it could have an unknown effect on the shopkeepers and the other business owners if too many restaurant owners or bars or whatever decide, hey, we're going to add capacity, and other folks will not have time or places to park for shopping. And I realize that restaurants operate mostly in the evening and bars and such, but that could be an unwanted side effect. If I had my druthers, I would say Campbell's got a 300 parking place garage right behind a key restaurant. We should go find out who built it, how much it costs, and then start the discussion.
Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm also, I think, pretty far on the side of decoupling. I guess I want to be a little bit careful. But when I think about the problem, right now we're designed to try to have a good parking experience, and is that really what we want? I think we want our businesses to be vibrant and to be able to survive and maybe make a little money or get past break even. So it seems to me it makes more sense to decouple it and let the businesses set up the seating that makes sense for them. And if there isn't good enough parking, then it limits the who's going to go to the stores. The other way around, we're limiting it, but not really knowing whether there could be more people there, or because we don't really know if the parking's filled up, or for certain times of day whether it's filled up or not. Also, as our community changes, more people, hopefully we're going to have more transportation options. The downtown is a large area that you can park and you do many things. I think we need to decouple, but I don't want to take the pressure off of us also trying to, as Mr. Leonardis said, make the bucket larger. I think that originally it seems like we had this coupling to keep the pressure on getting more parking spaces. So I don't want to take the pressure off of getting more parking spaces, but I am in favor of exploring the decoupling.
Ms. Jensen.
A comment and then a question. Just to follow up on the, we need to make sure that we have X number of seats and X number of parking. I've seen around the country lots of restaurants or eating establishments, I'm going to call them, where there are no seats. And they're very successful. So I could have 0 seats, but potentially need 500 parking spots, and I would, still be somehow in line with our CUPs. So I'm thinking that the notion of a seat equals a parking is not current. So I agree with the Vice Mayor that whatever we can do to be more fluid, and this is where I go to my question to staff, is that if I were interested in making a motion that said, how can I be the most fluid in trying to figure this out, versus starting at X and saying, we would like to decouple it, and then going off forever, and then coming up with something that in a year is obsolete. How would I accomplish that? And I'm looking to staff to tell me what would be the way to accomplish that.
So that would be to be silent, or to state that it would be the fire code. Much like Morgan Hill, they have parking ratios, but they are silent on the number of seats, just like we are silent on the number of people that can be in a dress shop or another type of retail establishment.
Further discussion, further questions? Ms. Sayak?
Again, following process, then what do you need as staff to prepare a draft to bring to the Planning Commission? If, let's say, we were silent, I don't know if we would get there, but would you then create, what would you bring to the Planning Commission?
We would redline the current town code under the section that speaks to the parking requirements, and leave it at just the square footage. So what it is now, it's 1 for 300 in the downtown, 1 for 235 square feet outside of downtown. That would remain, but the next section that then goes on to state if you have a separate bar, you can have 3 seats. If you don't, you can have 4. That would just be redlined out.
And if I may follow up,
Ms. Sayak?
And then if I own an eating establishment downtown, what's the effect on me then? It's just my seats are now dependent on the square footage of my
That's correct. Whatever the fire marshal says is a safe number to be in that area. And I'll look to Rob. We would probably need to do something if you're looking to allow people who already have a CUP with a maximum number of seats. We may be able to do a blanket statement that allows the least restrictive of those two numbers. And then moving forward, everybody would follow whatever the new ordinance was.
Following up on Ms. Sayak's question, if this document goes to the Planning Commission, would you be telling the Planning Commission, here's what the council wants you to do?
I think that we would say this was the discussion that we had, this was the council's recommendation, and they're asking for your feedback. I don't know. We could do whatever you would like us to do. We could say this is what the council wants, or we could say this is for your consideration.
Ms. Jensen?
A follow-up on the same question. We could stay silent on this page 2 of our staff report under where it says conditional use permits. You say, should the council choose a method other than parking space credits to calculate seats, ordinance language could be included to allow those blah, blah, blah. So it seemed like staff had something in mind. Did you have something in mind as options? And I'm going to say that and then add on to that. And if we didn't want to just stay silent, if we wanted to, for example, say, and we want to allow you to do agreements to share parking, and we want to do whatever, so that we were creative with our parking requirements, how would we do that?
We could certainly propose, if you could give us that feedback tonight, we could put it into an ordinance. We could also, like we had talked about, another option being is to not address it in the ordinance and then do a policy if you wanted those things to be more fluid, the shared agreements and things like that. And Joel may have more to add.
And I would just add for the shared parking in particular, that's currently in our conditional use permit table, so that would require modification as well. We can encourage it. Currently, it requires a CUP, but we could add language to the restaurant section specifically to allow for that, potentially without a conditional use permit.
Okay, I wouldn't necessarily want it to be limited to restaurants, but I understand you're telling me it's in the CUP table.
Further discussion. Ms. Sayak.
And one of the reasons why we would have to go through the Policy Commission, well, one of the goals is to have any interested person weigh in on this as a potential change townwide. So how would we alert the public that this is a significant issue that we're considering?
Typically, I will do an email out to all of the business owners. We could do other outreach if you would like, something in the paper or, we obviously would use our what's new and our avenues here, but if there was a deeper outreach that you wanted us to do, we could certainly do that.
Let me follow up on that. So you mentioned having the information go out to the business people. How would the information of a new parking code amendment or change be given to the public?
It would be done through our public noticing like we do with all of our noticing, but we could do further noticing if you wanted it to be not necessarily just in the legal notices in the paper.
Another option for your consideration is that typically the Los Gatos Weekly is looking for local stories such as this, and this might be a public interest story that a reporter may want to focus and highlight.
Sorry, I cut you off. Do you have anything else?
No, actually, it was along the same vein. I think advertising and reaching out to the business owners is one subset, but if parking is a significant issue that is of concern to any patron, I think that's a townwide issue. And so I would encourage you to use all of our mechanisms so that it's just not the business, because they have a certain angle and we have to make sure that we're hearing from everyone.
Sure, absolutely.
All right, council, do we have a motion? Ms. Jensen.
Okay, I'll try a motion. My motion would be to direct staff to present options, including potential ordinance language, to the Planning Commission for discussion with respect to decoupling parking and seats. I'm just going to say that, in our codes and ordinances, and not indicate in any of the options presented that the council is directing a particular action, but that these things are being presented to the Planning Commission at the request of the council for discussion and feedback.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Mr. Rennie?
I'll second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Discussion. All right. Mr. Leonardis.
Well, I'm going to support the motion. I do believe in the concept of decoupling. I think it's an age-old question that's reared its head in this community for a long time, and I realize that a lot of the businesses are currently out of compliance in their CUPs with the seating, particularly the restaurants and such. I am concerned about some unknown consequences, as I was with the valet parking. Again, we can try what we can moving forward to kind of game this lack of parking in our community, but it's imminent that we're going to need a bigger bucket. So being that this is only going to go back to the Planning Commission and then come out, and I guess we'll be potentially voting on it again in the future, I will be supporting the motion.
Further discussion? Do I see Mr. Rennie? No? Oh, the town manager.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify the motion. If in the Planning Commission's discussion and feedback of the different options, they were to provide a recommendation for a specific ordinance proposal, would that meet the needs? So let's say they go beyond feedback and actually have a specific proposal for your consideration. Would that be acceptable?
We'll start with the maker of the motion. Is that what you had in mind?
Yes, and I'll just be more clear. What I had in mind with that, option 1 would be suspend portions. Option 2 would be take it out altogether. Option 3 would be language presented as per the staff report. Option 4 might be something else, and that it's for the Planning Commission to discuss, and if they got to the point where they wanted to recommend one of those options specifically, and that was an ordinance, that would be encompassed in my motion.
Thank you.
Before I discuss, seconder of the motion?
I think that was me. That's okay, yes.
All right. At this point, I thought I understood the motion and I was prepared to support it, but now that is inconsistent with my notes, so I will have Ms. Pravetti restate the motion.
Okay, the motion, as I heard it, was for staff. The council would be directing staff to present options, including potential ordinance language to decouple parking in seats in the code for discussion and feedback by the Planning Commission.
All right, thank you. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. We are on agenda item 11, Community Grants Program Update. Sub A, receive the Community Grants Program Update. Provide direction on potential modification to community grant process, funding categories, evaluation criteria, etc. Staff report.
Good evening, Council. Mayor Christina Gilmore, Assistant to the Town Manager. The item you have before you this evening is the Community Grants Program Update. At the June 2nd, 2015 budget hearing, the Council expressed a desire to learn more about the Community Grant Program. And so this staff report and presentation this evening has provided the Council with background on the Community Grant Program, which has been in effect for 20 plus years in the town of Los Gatos, as well as information on the grant application process, which are included as attachment 1 and 2 of your packet, as well as a 10-year history of the grant allocations that the town has made since 2005, and that is included as attachment 3 in your packet. So just to give a very high-level summary of the grant program, the grants are reviewed and recommendations are made by 2 commissions, the Arts Commission, reviews and makes recommendations for arts, cultural and education grants, and the Community and Senior Services Commission reviews and make recommendations to the council for human services grants. Traditionally, the last several years, the town has administered approximately $100,000 in community funding grants. In the last budget cycle, the council approved approximately $90,000 for community and senior services grants, for the human services grants, and $19,800 for arts, cultural, and education grants. Each of the commissions does have an evaluation process that they follow annually. So once the applications are released at the beginning of the calendar year to interested agencies who want to apply for the funds, each commission appoints a subcommittee, a grant evaluation subcommittee, who reviews each application based on the criteria that is listed in your staff reports and in attachments 1 and 2. Following the subcommittee review, they make a recommendation to the full commission. They hold a public hearing. Each of the applicants are invited to attend the public hearing and present 3 minutes each on a highlight of their programs. From that process, the commission adopts a recommended allocation for each organization, and that recommendation is submitted to the council for their review and approval during the annual budget cycle. The staff is proposing to work with each of the commissions in addition to several of the community agencies who have received annual grants to identify some future process improvements. Staff has been working with the commissions for the last several years, and we recognize that there's probably many ways that we can make this process moving forward a lot more easier for both the commissions as well as for the agencies to apply for. So such recommendations that staff would propose, and we would work with each of the commissions as well as the agencies to get feedback and other recommendations for process improvements, could potentially include revising the grant funding cycle from a fiscal year to a calendar year, revising the quarterly reporting to include, and also into including more meaningful performance measures and metrics for each of those agencies for the reporting. Working with our town attorney to revise and streamline our agreement for services, as well as digitizing our application so that agencies can apply in a more streamlined process online through an e-signature platform. Any of those process improvements that the commissions consider with the feedback from the agencies would be brought forward for town council approval, and staff would recommend that those recommendations, if approved by the council, would be implemented in the following budget year of fiscal year 2017-18. So staff is asking for council to provide some feedback and direction on the grant process. On the board, we have, that's also included in your packet at the bottom of page 3, we have 2 questions for the council. We ask that council provide some feedback and direction on any potential changes to the community grant programs if the council does desire to see the program revised or updated. Examples could be changes to the existing funding categories, evaluation criteria, or budget allocation that would meet council's priority and objectives. And I do want to add that within the staff report, staff does recommend that the community grant funding allocation for the upcoming budget year for 2016-17 be based on the prior year allocation, and that amount was $109,800. And then the second question we ask for direction from the council would be to find out what other input or direction the council would like to offer regarding the community grant process. So that concludes the report. Staff is available to answer any questions.
Questions of staff. Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Several questions. Where to start here? So you suggested changing from fiscal year to calendar year. How does that make any difference?
Well, that's something we would like to explore. So we would like to talk to each of the agencies who have been past recipients to see if that helps with the process, the application process. So that's just an idea that staff was putting forward. We don't know if that would make a difference, but that's something a question that we could ask.
Another question. How cumbersome, in other words, cost, effort, so forth, is it for the receiving agency to administer their grant and do all the follow-up? And then how cumbersome and how much does it cost us to follow up? And are all grants the same? I see we have a lot of different dollar amounts. If you get $1,000, do you have to put as much effort in reporting and administering as a $20,000 grant?
Correct. So our current grant process is based on a former federal grant process that the town used to administer, which was the Community Development Block Grant process. So the current process is very time intensive, both from staff and from what I assume, and just in talking to agencies who apply for funds on an annual basis, it's time intensive for the agencies. There is quite a bit of paperwork that needs to be filled out for just the application. We have a lengthy list of supporting documents that have to be submitted. And then once a grant is approved by the council and administered by the town staff, we have quarterly agreements, quarterly reporting. And so that takes amount of staff time to review, to process. Comes in through our administratively, and then it goes through the finance department. So I can't estimate the number of hours. However, from town staff time, we do devote quite a bit of time annually, especially at the beginning of the calendar year, to get the process up and running and to the council for final recommendations, and then for the administrative review and approval process for the quarterly reporting and financials.
Mr. Rennie?
Yeah, thank you. So would it be more, I'm thinking, so maybe we'll start with the question. Have you looked at ways to reduce the paperwork, make it more streamlined? I think you mentioned an easier way to apply. Would it be, what if you went to a 2-year cycle, you gave grants every 2 years, would that help to reduce the cost? I'm assuming, we could, for example, have more money if we spent less staff time administering. We'd have more money to actually give to these organizations, and they'd have more money to provide their services if they weren't doing paperwork. So I assume this is a good thing that we want to find ways to streamline. So on the 2-year question.
Yeah, so the grant process was administered on a 2-year cycle, I believe as far back as 3 or 4 budget cycles ago. And I believe in 2013, it went back to a 1-year cycle. And I wasn't able to find any supporting documentation as to why that change was made. So perhaps moving to a 2-year cycle would cut some of the administrative time and cost, both from the town side as well as from the grantee side, or grantee side. Any other process improvements, I assume we could explore and understand, how that can make the whole process a lot easier. Over the summer, we had a summer intern who did some preliminary benchmarking for the town, looking at other grant programs, applications, mostly from nonprofit agencies, and did identify some process improvements that would streamline the entire process. So we do have that information, and if that is council's direction, we would go back to that initial research and try to figure out what would be the best way for us to move forward.
Have another.
Mr. Rennie?
Thank you. So in terms of the number of grants we're giving out, when I look at the list, it looks like it's a fairly large number of grants. Would it be more prudent to cut back the number of grants and just make them larger?
Absolutely, and that is at the discretion of the council. So the council, every budget cycle, has the opportunity to change the recommendations, to change the funding amounts. So that is definitely within the power of the council, and that is one of the questions that we're asking this evening, if the council would like to see any of the grant process change, including budget allocation. That would be direction we are seeking from the council this evening.
I think we would need to understand, if we made that change, what does it save in terms of staff costs, for example? I don't think we can just make it on a guess.
That's correct. And so staff would have to come back to the council with some estimates or some further information for the council.
Thank you.
Further questions of staff? Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Ms. Gilmore, looking at the chart, it looks like there's a lot of organizations that might be outside of the vicinity of the town of Los Gatos. And when you're giving out money, you want to have it support your own community, I feel, because there's a lot of needs within our own community. Has there been any analysis done on what percentage of roughly the $100,000 we gave away is used within our community versus outside of our community?
I don't have a percentage off the top of my head. However, we do require agencies as part of their application process to quantify the number of Los Gatos residents that they anticipate serving, and that's also included as part of the quarterly report. So we try very hard to ensure that the organizations that receive funds do serve some portion or some percentage of Los Gatos residents. It is true that several of the agencies on this list are not physically housed in Los Gatos. Some of them serve the broader Santa Clara County, and Los Gatos is a portion of the population that they serve.
Thank you.
Further questions of staff? Ms. Sack.
I'm going to take the opposite of that. One of the issues that I had heard when looking at the recipients is, do we look at equity in who we're providing grants to? And a specific example that was brought to my attention. So art docents of Los Gatos, who I absolutely think is a great recipient, they teach Los Gatos kids in the Los Gatos Union School District, but do we ever look at opportunities to offer grants to equivalent entities that are in the other school districts?
That serve Los Gatos?
Correct.
So I would say I can't answer that question definitively. I'd have to go back and look to see if any other organizations that serve Los Gatos residents have applied for the funds. Art Docents is an organization that annually applies for funds. Part of the process improvements that staff is recommending is increased outreach to other agencies and organizations that serve Los Gatos residents, understanding that there may be other organizations that have not been identified or are not aware of the funding process. So that was something that we plan on doing for this upcoming budget cycle, and we would continue to do it for other years.
So it sounds like those are specific comments that you would like to hear from us. Like,
correct.
If you're looking at this entity, perhaps you can broaden so that there's an equity in who you're serving.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions of staff? Seeing none, thank you. If you want to address us on this item, please submit a card. I do have a card, Tom Picro.
Hi, Tom Picro, 108 Panorama Way. I'm a member of the Community and Senior Services Commission, currently chair, but I'm speaking as an individual. I first would like to say I agree that some updating, as Christine has suggested, is I think, a good idea, a timely thing to do. Next, I'd like to commend the council for many years now of supporting community needs through this grant process. I think that's been a very valuable contribution, and I think it not only provides some direct money, but it helps to leverage community service providers who are in our community to meet the needs of our town people, and I think it's been a forward-looking activity. The next thing I would say is that the needs haven't completely stood still, so I just like to modestly suggest that if funds were to become available, some modest increase might be well spent. Just as one example, you can see the number of seniors in our community has been growing rather rapidly. There's now 19, according to our website, Los Gatos, is 19% of the people in Los Gatos are over 65, and a third of the people are over 55. So the aging community does meet some of the benefit from these grants, as do the teens and as do disadvantaged and others, which is very valuable. I would finally comment that we could sync better on the advising to the council in terms of recommendations through the cycle, but I don't see it as a problem if you should so choose, if budgets were available, to make some changes in the budget allocation for the coming year. We could always provide supplemental advice in the May-June timeframe. There's always out of sync right now, as you know, because if we go through the process, the budget is actually allocated just at the very end of the fiscal year in the May-June timeframe. So simply doing a supplemental adjustment is to provide for your consideration. It's not a problem.
Questions of the speaker? Hold on. Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Mr. Pickrow, I'm thinking, would it be inappropriate to ask the commission to evaluate the whole reporting process to see if it can be streamlined? Of course, we want a certain amount of reporting so that people are accountable for the money we've given them. But again, we want to get to the point that they're spending money on services and not on doing paperwork. Would that be something the commission could evaluate?
I think we could help on that. First, I should say that the commission isn't involved in that, and so it doesn't have firsthand knowledge right now, except in the case that we have commissioners visit during the year, at least once during the year, each of the agencies which are supported, and we spend an hour or several hours with the people who are administering that agency to learn about their process, ask about issues, questions, and so forth. And so we have some sense of that. I think we certainly need to depend on help from the town staff and others, but we'd be happy to help in any way we could there.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, sir. I think I got another card. I did. Leafa, go.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. I was not planning to come to speak on any issue, but this is one that intrigues me in that I've appeared before this council in the past representing a place for teens in town and the Community Services Commission as well. And the council and the commission were very supportive of that agency, and we appreciate that. I appreciate the commitment the council has made over the years to help these different agencies in town providing the various services. You are to be commended. Secondly, listening to some of the discussion, one of the considerations that was discussed was having a semi-annual rather than an annual budget and review. I think an annual, it serves the community better in that it's dynamic. The activities that occur, the types of fundings that are necessary have to be reflective of those types of changes. So therefore, I would endorse continuing with an annual rather than a semi-annual budgeting and allocation. It also helps the agency to recruit additional funds, showing the support from their local town. I know when I was at a Place for Teens, I was able to get additional support from surrounding communities and other agencies, other nonprofits who would help us because I could show that the town of Los Gatos, through the Community Services Commission, was supporting the agency. So there's that ripple effect that needs to also be considered. I think the accountability that is necessary, the types of reports that are necessary, and I appreciate the way that was handled. Again, this is years ago, but it worked very well to provide guidance and support, and that is appreciated. It was appreciated, and I think the current agencies that benefit from your help also appreciate that type of support. So, thank you.
Thank you. Questions of the speaker? Yes, Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Mr. Fago, first of all, thank you for all those years you put in at the Teen Center. And I was wondering, from your recollection, if you found any part of our grants process to be cantankerous, daunting, too much paperwork, difficult, such and such. I mean, to kind of rephrase this question, do you think anything from your experience would need to be changed with our process?
To be very honest with you, I thought it was a very fair and equitable process. I thought it was reasonable in terms of the requirements from us as a beneficiary to the support that you provided. It provided a good stream of communication in both directions. The inspections, if you will, I think were very beneficial to both sides. As far as the process, making it automated online, I think is a great boon. That will help. That'll expedite things and improve the transparency as well. As far as other critiques, I also benefited, as the other agencies did, from listening to our competing agencies trying to get the funding from you. There was a limited pot, and we all wanted a piece of it. I think also, to an earlier point that was mentioned about maybe if less grants were given, that would allow for a larger grant to some of these agencies. Anything that shows town support to any of these agencies helps them to get additional funds from other resources. So I would be against reducing the number of beneficiaries, agencies who benefit, but rather as many as you can help would be beneficial. The process itself otherwise, in my experience, and I did it 14 years, was pretty good, pretty reasonable.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you. I have no other cards. See no one coming forward. I will close the public testimony of this hearing and look to the council for discussion motion. Mr. Leonardis.
I will dive in first. Thank you, Mayor Spector. Just some general comments. I heard concerns about or ideas about ease of use, maybe best practices in other communities could be looked at. I myself would like to see a focus on our community first. I understand that some of the money could go outside of the community, but if it were to go outside the community, what I'd like to see is more attention to, if we're giving an organization a big grant, $10,000, $20,000, how many residents is it actually serving? Is it serving 2 or 3, or is the majority going to another municipality? Whereas an organization like what the Vice Mayor mentioned with Art Docents, which serves a lot of school children, only gets $4,000. It has a broader reach. I would like to see us broaden our reach. As Mr. Fagot stated, I would sure hate to narrow the scope of the people who are applying for grants or dissuade them and increase the amount that they're applying for. I would say let's reach out into other school districts. Historically, and I worked on the CBDG before Mr. Rennie was appointed, and you get the same people coming back year after year asking for the same amounts or maybe a little bit more than they did the year before because they understand the process and they know where to go. So I would hate to see all of our grants be considered just because there's only a select few pool of people actually know about those grants and they come back year after year. So I think whatever we can do to broaden the awareness or broaden the reach to other school districts or other organizations within our community would be would help us serve the community better. And regarding semi-annual versus annual allocation, I think the annual allocation corresponding with our budget is a practice we've used effectively for a good number of years. So I would probably be supportive of maintaining that.
Thank you. You made a number of points, but there was no motion wrapped in that. So I will look to the other council members for a motion. Is that a hand up?
Yes, please.
Okay, Mr. Rennie.
I guess I'll try to make a motion out of this. and maybe it's not that clear because I don't think the answers aren't clear. What I see is, I think we should, so my motion would be to direct staff to evaluate how to reduce time, or the intensity of the reporting. There seems to be possibly a trade-off between efficiency of, how we spend our money on staff time versus giving money away and the organizations using it, and the trade-off with broad support, finding other good organizations, the budding organizations in our town that need the help. So I'm not ready to give direction to say, I threw out some ideas of two-year cycle, reducing the number of grants, but I'm not ready to go with whether those are the right questions or not. I was hoping staff could explore those. And as Mr. Leonardo said, I am on the Housing and Community Development Advisory Committee for the county, and I know that the county organization is also looking at how do they do this more efficiently. And we may not want to copy them, but maybe there's some ideas. We also may want to consider, they are talking about cutting their number of grants in half and doubling the size of them for efficiency. Maybe instead of us doing that, we want to go the other way and try to support the organizations that are going to lose out on that. So I don't really have an answer, but I'm asking staff to evaluate it. Hopefully somebody can repeat that motion back.
All right, well, we have a motion. Actually, I can't repeat that one, and I'm normally very good at it. So we'll see if staff can, and if they cannot, we're going to come back to you, Mr. Rennie.
So I just got the essence of what I heard, and please correct me if this is wrong. Excuse me. A motion to direct staff to evaluate reducing the reporting requirements and to evaluate and explore efficiency and effective measures.
Mr. Rennie, does that sound like your motion?
Yes.
Okay, that's the motion. Do we have a second? Yes.
May I make a friendly amendment?
Well, you may
please
second the motion.
May I second the motion and move to make a friendly amendment?
What was that friendly amendment be?
To also direct staff to broaden their outreach when funding is available so that we widen the amount of Los Gatos residents we serve.
Mr. Rennie, is that acceptable to you?
Yes, that's acceptable.
All right, then we have a second for the whole thing, right? So we have a motion, a whole motion. It's been seconded. Discussion. Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Question about the process. What happens next? So staff goes out and they do their research and such bring us back another report, at which time we will say do this, this, and this, and adopt it, or tell me what happens after.
That is correct. So the immediate next steps are to release the application for 16-17 budget year. So that will happen later this week. Those applications will be due the end of January, and we'll begin the new process for the intake and the review and the recommendations for the budget process for 16-17. At the same time, staff will work with each of the commissions to bring forward some of the direction that the council has provided as far as reviewing processes and trying to reduce the time and the intensity of the reporting and the application process, as well as identifying additional agencies to broaden that outreach. So we'll work on that with the commissions, perhaps through their subcommittee process, and then finalize those recommendations, bring them forward for the council at a future date for council consideration.
Mr. Leonardis.
So as it stands now, the process for 16-17 will be under the current business as usual.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Further discussion. Seeing none, call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you, council and staff. All right, agenda item 12, information report on community choice energy, and direct the town manager to return with an ordinance and other implementing documents for the January 19th, 2016 council meeting. Do we have a staff report? Yes.
Yes, we do. Thank you. Matt Morley, Director of Parks and Public Works. In addition to the staff report, you have a technical study in your packet that explores community choice energy, or CCE, and also Sean Marshall from Lean Energy, who helped in the technical report and works with Silicon Valley Community Choice Energy Partnership, is here with us in the back row. And if we get to the technical side, she'll be able to help with those questions. So CCE is a way to obtain local control over the type of energy that's purchased for a set of customers. CCE is in place and operating successfully in 3 locations in California, in Marin, Sonoma, and Lancaster, and is also being explored in several other communities. To explain it further, it's important to understand the electrical power system. And so in basic sense, the local utility, PG&E in our case, buys power from electric generators in California or elsewhere in the country. And this power can come from a variety of sources. It can come from solar, it can come from wind, it can come from nuclear, natural gas, a whole variety of sources. And once purchased, that electricity enters the grid. And from that point, the grid being a giant mesh or web that cannot distinguish between the power sources, that power is distributed to its customers in a mix. And ultimately, it's delivered to our homes and businesses. In CCE, or Community Choice Energy, a new entity, a joint powers authority, takes on the role of purchasing the electricity, so the very front end of that. PG&E is still responsible for the transmission or bringing that electricity around to our homes and businesses. And PG&E is also still responsible for billing, so the bill would still remain a PG&E bill. The customers in participating jurisdictions are automatically enrolled in CCE unless they opt out, and I'll get to that in more detail. So why are communities considering CCE? Electricity consumption is one of the largest contributors to greenhouse gases, and changing the source of electricity can reduce those greenhouse gases and increase the use of renewable energy. CCE shifts that control to a decision that's made at the local level versus by PG&E at their level. So with that in mind, 4 jurisdictions got together to explore it locally. Those are the original partners. And as the idea took form, they reached out to a larger group of cities, including the town of Los Gatos. And this group forms the Silicon Valley Community Choice Energy Partnership. The partnership has provided guidance for potential structure of a joint powers authority, or JPA, and provides the goals of a CCE program. Ultimately, the JPA will take on the role and make the final decisions for a CCE effort. This is just a quick chart to demonstrate the energy or electric consumption by the various jurisdictions. You can see where Los Gatos falls on the continuum, and the 4 larger jurisdictions are Cupertino, the unincorporated area of Santa Clara County, Mountain View, and Sunnyvale. So I talked a little bit about the program having goals. To further the discussion, the partnership will put these goals together with a focus on competitive rates while increasing renewable energy and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Out of these goals, the partnership contracted for a technical study, and that's the document that you have in your packet. The technical study explored 3 options. Note that these options do not reflect what the JPA ultimately will decide, but rather provided various scenarios for exploration that reflect potential distributions or extreme scenarios to test the viability of a program. All 3 options demonstrated an opportunity for success, and to go over them sort of briefly, scenario 1 focuses on rate sensitivity, so it keeps the price more competitive. It retains the greenhouse gas levels as we currently see them, and modestly increases the renewable energy levels. Scenario 2 increases the renewable and carbon-free content, so that reduces the greenhouse gas or uses more greenhouse gas-free solutions, and does a little bit less in terms of rate competitiveness. And scenario 3 highlights a maximum environmental impact and pays even less attention to the rate competitiveness, so the rates start to reach parity with PG&E out in the outer years. For comparison, PG&E is mandated, or PG&E's renewable content now is about 27%, and they're mandated to achieve 33% by 2020 and 50% by 2030. So with this program comes some risks. There is a risk that for whatever reason the JPA may fail, and if that happens, the town could lose its initial investment. But the JPA is in place to buffer partner liability, and bonds that would be in place to ensure that customers are taken care of so that they're able to be switched back to a PG&E type structure. Additionally, because this program involves the purchase of electricity that can be volatile in pricing, there is a risk that the rates won't be as competitive as forecast. The study has accounted for this in several ways. One, by using conservative estimates. Two, by discussing competitive rates, not cheaper rates. And three, by phasing in other programs such as conservation or other efforts over time. Again, the point of the technical study was to explore these risks, and the study determined that CCE can be successful. As you can see by this slide, there has been and continues to be significant outreach to the public. We're currently looking for a community meeting in Los Gatos in early January, pending the outcome of this discussion item tonight. And it's important to note that although customers will automatically be subscribed, they will have at least 4 opportunities to opt out, and that comes in the form of mailings to the customers to let them know that the opportunity is there. So although the program is looking for March completions, we have targeted January 19th, the council meeting January 19th, as an opportunity to return to the council. And as you can see, the JPA is scheduled for its first meeting after the various entities have joined, and that shakes out in April of 2016. As the JPA is formed, there's several provisions that you should be aware of. The JPA's purpose is to provide energy and energy-related programs. It will have a board of directors, and the board of directors will be composed of a regular director appointed by and from each governing body. That means a council member would be on one of the board of directors, and an alternate would be appointed by the governing body, but the alternate doesn't necessarily have to be a council member. Voting is done by majority of the directors, so one director, one vote. But in addition to recognize that there's some entities that have a greater stake, there is a voting shares vote. So once the 51% is achieved, there's an opportunity for items to be considered in a proportionate type voting scenario. And there are initial costs associated with the program, and one of the provisions is to try and reimburse those to the agencies within the first 4 years. And in addition, there are withdrawal provisions in the draft agreement as it's being developed. So that should an entity wish to withdraw in the future, there are opportunities to do that, although it may come may come at a cost, and the JPA would ultimately decide what that structure looks like. So I talked about a fiscal contribution to the program. The Los Gatos share would be $150,000. That's a $100,000 initial investment with a $50,000 contingency. As you can see, there was a phase 1 that's already in progress where the original 4 entities have already contributed. That was to pay for the technical study and some other studies that have been done. And these contributions would go to fund the startup costs of a JPA, to fund staffing, to fund the work that needs to be done to establish a JPA from a legal perspective, and those types of expenses. The schedule looks like this in a sense that there is work to do once a JPA is established. It doesn't automatically switch on the change of where the energy comes from. And this is currently what the schedule looks like. You can see that the program would launch in about this time of next year. So these are our recommendations in summary, and staff and Sean are available for questions as needed.
Thank you. Questions of staff? Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. So I'm going to challenge you, Director Morley, with a tough question. Generally, I like the idea, but I, kind of have this, I need to play devil's advocate for a minute. So I'm thinking about community choice seemed like it was a good idea when we didn't have large renewable energy requirements by the state. So I start thinking now, by 2030, we need to have 50%, the state's requiring 50% be renewable energy. If nobody did any of these community choice programs, which are probably in the 75% range, let's say, for most people, PG&E would be forced to come up with 50%. So if we create all these community choices where we take the risk and we put in money and we drive it to 75%, does that mean now that PG&E can be less than 50% average on theirs because we've raised the average for them?
Things can change over time, but as it's set right now, PG&E is regulated by the CPUC, and their regulations are that they need to achieve the 50% level.
Is that on what they produce or what goes over their lines? Like, are they averaged down by, are we helping their average by coming up with a community choice that we're putting, say, 75% renewables in?
Hopefully Sean will throw something at me if I say it wrong, but my understanding is that our numbers would not count towards PG&E's numbers. They would be on their own to meet those numbers.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Vice Mayor.
So let's take the opposite of that scenario then. There's a lot of things happening with PGE's power production in the upcoming future. If their numbers go down, does that in any way affect the percentages that we would set with our different scenarios? Or would our JPA lock us in at a certain amount regardless of what PG&E does in the future?
I would expect, so the JPA hasn't formed and they'll set the policy as they form. I would expect that they would set target levels of greenhouse gas producing energy and renewables, and they would aim to meet those targets. I don't think there's anything that would preclude them from changing that in the future, but they would set a target, and these are exemplary, but not necessarily where they would set them.
So if I can follow up. So then because when you're looking at this, you're looking at it from two perspectives. One is the cost associated to the average person, and that cost is in parity with PG&E. And so when we set what the purchasing is, we're not necessarily continually monitoring what the PG&E costs will be in the future, will we?
Yeah, I think the idea would be to continue to ensure that we're competitive with PG&E and to balance. So for the JPA, the consideration would be rate competitiveness as well as GHG and renewable content.
And then one last question. How often would that be set?
So they could set it on as often as they wanted to, with the caveat that they would be entering into some contracts for the purchase of energy. So to some extent, they'll be committed down the road a little bit. And the JPA will set the policy on the length of those contracts to allow flexibility in their adjusting.
So that's all still something nebulous that the JPA themselves would set.
Right.
Should this get jumped?
Exactly.
Okay.
And if the town participates, the town would have a say in what that looks like.
Okay.
Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Mr. Morley, I noticed this $150,000 price tag to experiment with this. Where would that money be coming from, and does the town currently have that money available with all of our competing needs for capital?
Yeah, I think the question is always that there's competing needs, and is this a priority for the council? We have talked about several options, and we'll solidify those options and bring them to the council, I think, in January. That's part of the reason why we don't have everything wrapped up today, is we're looking at what the agreement's going to look like and what the financing options are going to be for us. So we'll have some options for the council to consider in January on how to meet that need.
Mr. Leonardis.
One follow-up. Thank you, Mayor. So assuming that the council thinks this is a good idea and they say, yes, go ahead, when do you think we would be on the hook to be writing that check? I see some phasing. I see $100,000. Is that right up top, and then 50,000 with phase 2 and 3, such and such.
So if the JPA is established in April, they would be looking for that contribution at the start of the JPA at that time frame.
Thank you.
Mr. Rennie?
Just quickly, so the 100 to 150 we're supposed to put in is just start money that we should get paid back over some amount of time. What's the amount of time on that?
It's the goal of the program is to pay back the contributions over 4 years. I believe the other CCE efforts have been quicker than that on their payback, but the program felt comfortable with that as a commitment.
Thank you.
Ms. Jensen?
Just a question about the financing and the timing. I'm curious whether we're putting the cart before the horse, because if the council says, yes, we're interested in doing this, have we committed to the 150,000 without knowing where it could come from and what our payment options are? I'm just trying to figure out, is there a point where if we say tonight, great, and then you come back and you say, well, the price is really X and you don't have it and we have no options, are we then allowed to go, time out, not such a good idea?
We're not committing at this point. We wanted to get you the information early so that you could have an opportunity to hear it before we came to you with a budget adjustment to fund it, and before we came to you with the agreement. So once, if you direct us to go forward, we'll bring the opportunity for funding as well as an agreement to enter the JPA on the 19th.
Further questions? Yes, Vice Mayor.
Just because it's bugging me, can you explain unbundled renewable energy certificates?
I can. So I'm not the expert, so hopefully this will be a high-level description. So when energy renewable energy is generated, there are credits that go with it for that renewable energy based on the units of energy that are produced. Those credits can either go with the energy or they can be unbundled and bought and sold on the open market. So the idea would be that an organization could buy energy credits and meet the renewable by doing that, not actually by generating. So it's sort of a way around. It's become a questionable way of achieving the goal, and so the program is not looking at using unbundled credits.
Buying your environmental goodness. All right, other questions? No questions of staff? I have no cards. Does anybody want to address us on this matter? No one coming forward. I'll close the public testimony of our hearing and turn to the council for discussion or a motion. Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. My biggest concern about this is, of course, the money. We have so many unfunded needs in our community. And I would like to see if we have $150,000 to possibly lose, we could lose it doing something else that would serve the community. That's not an experiment. I would be open-minded to down the line, seeing if this JPA gets formed and perhaps joining it later. But because we have so many unfunded needs in our community, primarily our infrastructure, I am not interested in spending this kind of money at this time.
Further discussion? Ms. Vice Mayor.
Actually, I'm quite the opposite. I understand $150,000 is a significant amount in our budget, but we also made significant commitments in our climate action plan as well as in our sustainability plan, and I think by participating in this, where we can give our residents, if not lower costs in electricity, but better choices, I think that's a positive thing for our residents, and $150,000 investment in a larger commitment to the environment that we've signed on through our different documents is something that I think would be of value with those funds.
Should I hear a motion?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and make the motion to to direct the town manager to return with an ordinance and other implementing documents for the January 19 council meeting. And based on the information provided, we are not committed to a certain amount now, but we are at least beginning the process of looking at the options available and also opening up further discussion for our town residents to weigh in if we request this community meeting that other communities are currently having.
Do I have a second? Mr. Rennie?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will second it because I don't really think it's an experiment. I agree with everything the Vice Mayor said about our climate action plans and so forth. And from the looks of this, it's got a lot of momentum. It looks like it's going to be successful. So I think the risk is relatively low, and I can second this.
Thank you. I got a motion. I'm going to support the motion. Yes, at some point it's going to cost us some amount of money, which is relatively modest at this point. We could anticipate having that money returned to us over some period of time. I agree that $150,000 or whatever it is could serve the community, as was stated. However, I think that being the environmental benefits of this program serve the community even greater. Further discussion. Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Generally speaking, serving on a number of these JPAs, some of them are established for good intentions, but they have to prove their worth over time. And I don't know, it's an expansion of big government, an intrusion into, how can I say it, our funding base. I really feel like I would rather give $1,000 to 150 employees in Los Gatos at this time and see if this thing makes it down the road. I know I don't have the authority to do that, but I will not be supporting the motion. I guess I don't see the vision in this.
Further discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Passes 4-1. Mr. Leonardis voting no. All right, so at this juncture, on behalf of the entire council and the town staff, we wish the community a happy holiday, and we will see you on January 19th.